Okay, yes, there's a lot of registrations, and usually, as usual, I think a lot of people coming for the replay. We'll get started. So today's webinar or class today is about escaping the tax financial matrix. Who's come here from Perth Awake out of interest? The Perth Awake group. Just type a Y or raise your hand. Quite a few, yep, I thought so. Okay, fabulous. Well, we're getting a bit of a treat today. I'll be giving some hopefully very useful knowledge to really help you. So just to get started, I've got to give my normal disclaimer. It should not be relied upon, obviously. You've got to make your own decision about how to proceed. And obviously, if you want specific advice, you've always got to go to an expert yourself. You know, that's just kind of smart and goes without saying. So let's get underway. So just basically, recordings are generally available pretty quickly is our aim and our rule. So feel free, please, to just basically, ask questions in the chat. If they relate to the class, I'll answer them on the spot. If they are kind of going to interfere with the flow, I will come in later on. So anyway, I always like to kind of start. So today's format, in fact, before I go here, I do like to start with a little bit of a philosophy behind what I consider the financial tax matrix and things like that. We'll be looking a little bit at income, investment, and what's going on, because there's so much scaremongering and fear-mongering out there. But honestly, most of it's just bullshit. It really is. I mean, yes, it's not too difficult to work out that we're heading into a fairly major time of crisis. I think we're already in it, well and truly, as we can see from the rising cost of living and the fact that governments effectively experimented with the flu as a marketed thing and shut the whole world down quite successfully. So that in itself tells you we've got some problems to deal with. But in saying that, does that mean that your life is screwed? Quite the contrary. That's been my biggest message to clients I work with. Quite the contrary. Just because the world is fucked, excuse the French, doesn't mean your life has to be fucked. In fact, and generally the people who prosper in times of crisis are those who stay level-headed and can stay balanced in the whole thing. Who's here ready to stay balanced and kind of really get on top of your finances and live an amazing life moving forward, no matter what goes on in the world? Just type a Y or raise your hand. Good. Excellent. Because that's the kind of people I want to help. I mean, if you are more just wanting to have a whinge about what governments are doing, look, by all means, you're welcome to do that in your private time. But here we're here for solutions. That's kind of how I tick. So let's get started. The biggest thing that I was teaching in COVID, because a lot of people were coming when I was teaching about the mandates and that, I was saying that there's nothing new under the sun. And if you go back in history, even the whole crap we saw wasn't the first time it's happened. Governments have done this kind of stuff many, many times throughout the last hundreds of years. And we think it's new because we've never seen anything like it. And often our ancestors or our parents and that haven't. But the reality is it's not new under the sun. And in the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible, Solomon, who was the wisest man that ever lived, I love this quote here. Things that never happened before happen all the time. And that's the reality. What we're seeing right now, it's just normal. I mean, humans being humans, I mean, we're pretty messed up species. We really are. If you want to map out what's going on in the world. And really, more than anything, as I see it, escaping the Matrix is facing the ugly truth of it. And for those of you who saw the Matrix movie with Neo, and hopefully you all did, if you didn't see it, just write no in the chat. Just hopefully everyone saw the movie. But one of the things that Neo had to first do was leave out of his illusion and see the truth. And I don't know if those of you who remember it, but he was very traumatized and like distressed, like he completely freaked out. And I've got a very good psychologist friend who I helped a lot in the whole process, and I go to see him quite regularly myself to help me build great mental strength and, good mental health, keep it in good state. And he said COVID woke everyone up on levels that kind of like a forced awakening. And he said there's more mental health and more trauma going on right now. Psychiatrists are booked out months in advance, and mainly because suddenly people are being woken up now. They're seeing the truth of what's really going on and realizing the delusion that they lived in isn't the truth. And the first thing is facing the real ugliness of the truth. That's the whole nature of escaping the matrix is actually seeing it for what it is and then working out how to play the game without getting caught up in a fight. And that takes a bit of wisdom and takes a bit of strength. And here I bring in a bit of my spiritual side. I mean, I've mentioned the Bible. Another book which I'm really into is the Bhagavad Gita. Anyone here who knows this book or likes it, it's a Hindu text, a very brilliant book. One of Gandhi's, a text that Gandhi particularly was known to have liked. So in this book here, I like how Krishna describes, he says that those established in wisdom live in continuous unbroken awareness. They're not the perishable body, but the Atman or mortal soul. So ultimately what it's saying is that we are a spiritual being living a human experience right now. And that's the way I approach finances and business. We're spiritual beings living a human experience, which also means living a financial experience, living a tax experience, living a wealth experience. And when you start to realize that, you go, what the heck? Let's just make as much money as I can. Let's just pay legally as little tax as I can. Let's learn to master the rules of the game. And once upon a time, I had a lot of challenges with being spiritual and being financial. That was a big blockage for me until I actually saw that we are spiritual beings living a human experience. And this is part of the human experience, is playing the game of the financial matrix and living in the West. And realizing that everything before us is like a game. And the Bhagavad Gita, that's the whole theme of that book. It's just a game. And it's an illusion. And one of the things that Krishna was having to say to Arjuna was, don't worry about the fact they're your relatives. It's a very relevant book for the whole COVID mandates. Because Arjuna, in the book, his biggest challenge was he was a king. He knew what his family was doing was a great evil for society. And he knew that if he took on the war and fought them for the freedom of the people, that his family might die. And that was a huge distress for him. And he thought, well, I don't want to kill my family. I want to save them. And one of the things Krishna said to him was, you just have to understand, but what you're seeing is just their perishable bodies. It's not really them. If you have to fight for what's right and they happen to die, so be it. It's just, you've got to do what's right for your own journey and realize it's just a big game that's being played out. And once you see that, everything changes. The way you approach your financial life, the way you approach everything. Even one of the reasons why relatively what went on in COVID, I was like, yeah, I just saw it was just a horrible game, but it was still a video. It was still really just a game. And the key was to master and come out of it. And I'm sure many of you on here came out of it unjabbed. And in that sense, you won the game. And you probably, and you should, and if you came out of it unjabbed and that was your choice, then you should pat yourself on the back for it. You really should. You should honor your achievement. If you were jabbed because you wanted to and chose to, that's okay too. And that's the beauty of freedom of choice. So the biggest secret I was taught, because my background is kind of a bit weird, and maybe it's just worth quickly, squizzing along to my background before I explain this slide, and that will help you understand what I'm trying to say here. So basically, I've got a bit of an interesting background. I'm kind of the ultimate nerd and the ultimate crazy guy at the same time. I'm a qualified accountant. I'm a qualified lawyer. I'm a qualified financial planner. I got first-class honors. I've had firms with all of these. I sold an accounting firm recently. I shut my law firm down to follow my deeper dream and leave the matrix, because I used to basically, as a lawyer, the sense of injustice in me was what drove me. And I found out how corrupt the system was. And I was so horrified. The spiritual missionary in me, because I grew up in a missionary kind of environment and family, was saying, like, this is crap. I've got to do something about it. So I would regularly go and I fight the government in court. I mean, one of my favorite stories, in fact, still to this day, I think, on the internet, if you ever want a bit of a giggle, it's about, it was basically a case I took in Queensland where I just did it for the piss of it. So back in 2012, I argued a speeding fine, and I argued that basically the Queensland government had no right to give me the speeding fine, because basically they had no jurisdiction over me, because basically they didn't own the roads. And the particular sergeant who issued me the infringement was claiming that he did. And to my complete astonishment, I ended up actually winning that case. They eventually, on the last minute, changed on a slight different ground, so didn't show that. But that was a bit of fun, and I did a lot of this, and I won some amazing cases and that, and eventually I actually had a visit from, various cops and had a bit of a chat to me. They were very friendly guys. They told me, you can't keep winning these cases anymore. This is not good, and we're going to make sure you don't. And then next minute I found I wasn't winning any of my cases, and I was like, oh, okay. which was like remarkable, but that's what happened. And I then followed a more spiritual path and decided I was going to do more an education path, and I left the legal profession, among many other reasons. So I've got all this, and then I've also I've been involved in invisible worlds, underground kind of communities, and learned a whole lot of really interesting stuff. And one thing all of them told me was you've got to understand the matrix. When they said you got to understand, you've got to be in it, but yet out of it at the same time. Because if you try and fight it, you will lose. That's what they said to me. You'll lose. If you get too caught in it, you'll get choked up. That's why one of my favorite passages in the Bible is when they tried to trick Jesus. And one of the things they said to him was they pretty much asked him, should you pay taxes to Caesar? Now, they were deliberately trying to basically to trick him, because if Jesus turned around and said, well, no, you don't, then they would have reported him to the Roman government, and he would have been in all kinds of shit. But equally, if he said, well, yes, you do, then they would have said to the Jews, see, he's a traitor and you can't trust him. He's doing the Roman. So all he said was, well, show me a coin whose name is on it. He said, Caesar. He said, okay, give Caesar what Caesar and God's what is God's. And since they were dumbfounded at his wisdom. And there were so many reasons why that was wise, because that in itself gives you the whole clue. Jesus was saying, if you choose to play Caesar's game and use his coin, then follow his rules. It's like if you play Monopoly, you follow the rules of the game. Otherwise, people get pissed off if you cheat. So he says, if you're going to play Caesar's game and you're going to use his coin, that's the other big thing is coin, then you have to obey his rules. But he also knew at the same time that the Jewish were not using Caesar's coins. They were using shekels, a whole different currency. So effectively, he kind of completely owned the Pharisees, like fucked them over well and truly, because he was saying to them, yeah, so neither the Romans or the Jewish could argue what he is saying, because he was pretty much saying, if you choose to engage in the shekel and not engage in the system of then you don't have to. But if you choose to engage in it, so that's really the clue, and nothing has changed 2,000 years later from what that dude said. So yes, I know I may look only 21 years of age, and thank you for the compliments to everyone. But yes, I do actually have 30 years experience, 10 years at the tax office, and 20 years in private practice. So, and I'm sure you would all agree, I look 21, right? If you say that, you'll be in my good books. Okay, anyway, I have got a bit of a strange sense of humor. Okay, so this is the order of creation. It's God creates man and women, us, the sovereign beings. We create governments, which creates what's called persons or strawman. So what's that basically saying is that we, who God's created, and whatever God is, universal, higher law, deeper law, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, Krishna, Hindu, Vishnu, ultimately, these are all archetypes, as I see it, designed to help you understand there's one creator God who rules all, whatever, and which is beyond any human comprehension, who has to speak to us in lower language. My understanding of God these days is very simple. I'm saying, imagine that you're an all-resounding creator and you're trying to explain yourself to humans with limited minds. It's kind of like, as a parent, you're trying to explain stock market trading to a 3-year-old. You're going to have to dumb it down so much and use so much language to help them understand it that it's going to be crazy. It'd be very hard to explain options or stock trading or purchasing property to a 3 or 4-year-old. So you have to really dumb it down. And that's kind of how I see most religion. It's kind of trying to explain in explainable formats what a higher being and universal law functions, which has resulted in us being created, which then in turn, we create government systems. And ultimately, there was a time in history where governments were just more small communities of people kind of governing themselves and then setting up small groups. Because ultimately, the bigger the community, you can't, leaving people to their own devices, you start having problems. Because what happens if one person steals stuff from the other person, or someone, rapes or abuses someone, among the group of people, or basically starts doing bad stuff? There's got to be a system that makes them accountable and stops it. So originally, that's why governments came about. It was designed to bring accountability and just make sure people couldn't do what they wanted, and there was justice and consequences when people cause harm to other members of society. And we call that common law. common sense. It's like when you're affecting someone else's money or property and stealing, which can cause resentment, envy, jealousy, when you're hurting a person's body or raping them or stuff like that, or when you're taking someone's liberty, these are problems. If you just happen to be driving a little bit fast in your horse and cart, that's not really the only hurt that comes is if you do that in a way which hits someone or puts a danger to the road. And there's different layers, the fact you happen to go over a particular camera when a sign changed, like 1 meter earlier, again, that's got nothing to do with it. Whereas driving drunk on the road is. And why is it important to understand it? Because in Frederick Bastiat's book, The Law, which I'll just plonk in the chat for you, just in case you ever feel like you want to read. You can get it free online, but it's one of the first books I was given in the Sovereign Underground movement. He explains that you got to understand the difference between law and legal. Like law is basically what's common sense. It's like, for example, a good example he gave was a law saying that you can only have one child and killing the rest of them. That's clearly not law. That's kind of murder. You might be illegal, but you're not unlawful. And quite the contrary, you are probably being unlawful if you're killing people for that reason. And that's the example. And the other example he gives is that it might be illegal to avoid taxes when the government has got to pay 70%. But is it lawful that a government should be demanding 70% to just use on whatever they want? And at some point you start to say, well, actually, no, this is just straight up theft. And there's a fine balance between, and he says, whereas taxation is meant to be a contribution for services, that's a fair and equitable contribution to make sure that if you've got a government running. So what Bastiat acknowledges is that when you've got big societies, you do need some form of government to keep in order. And heaven help Australia, even with 26 million people, or US 330 million people with no government, everyone doing what they wanted, it would be a nightmare. But at the same token, I'm sure we would all agree that governments got to the point of complete absurdity now. And there's just committees and commissions made up for the sake of it, which means you've got these unlawful and illegal kind of stuff going on and unlawful stuff that's legal happening all the time. Like COVID, a lot of what the mandates was unlawful as you'll ever get in your life, but they were legal. And that was the whole point. So it's very good to be able to segment your mind and get a clear understanding of this kind of stuff and break this down in your mind, because that was, for example, one of the things I remember in a legal teaching I was giving about the state of emergency. I said, because a lot of people are saying it's not legal what they're doing. And I remember saying this is the problem why it's so bad. It actually is. It's unlawful as fuck because it's a blatant abuse of power. They're misusing a original power that was given in martial law times, that when society's in grave danger, like let's say we're about to be invaded by Japan, well, you can't have people running around asserting common law rights. You've got to mobilize the troops and defend the village or defend the country. So originally, state of emergencies was designed for that, or cyclones are about to hit, or fire has hit and is racing towards your city. Then you've got to have some kind of thing which says, fuck the common law rights, let's just stop the fire. Then, after we stop the fire and dealt with the tornado, then you can all go back to your common law rights. So that was originally what a state of emergency was. And if you actually read the legislation of state of emergency in the state of West Australia, for example, or in any state of Australia, that was what it talked about. Cyclones, like really severe, genuine viruses that are racing through killing people, or cyclones, tornadoes, fires, or invasions of war. But what was being done was extending. So it was legal what they were doing. They actually were following the exact process written in the law, but it was unlawful as fuck. And that's a dangerous time when it happens. So it's very important, if you're going to get out of the matrix, to be able to constantly distinguish what is legal and what is lawful. So, for example, in that situation, one of the reasons that a lot of people I helped and myself dealt with it was for that reason. I actually said to people, no, understand this is legal. This is the problem, but it's unlawful. So now we have to find ways around these mandates. And that's what we did. In every mandate, I found numerous loopholes, for example. And every law, and this is the beauty of complicated law, the more the laws that there are, the easier it is to find loopholes. It's far more difficult when you've got simple, straightforward written laws. A very good example was I'm convinced that God and and the Divine Mother appeared to Earth, spoke to the Victorian government and helped them to draft the payroll tax laws. Now, I'm joking, of course, but they were the most incredibly well done laws I've ever seen. I mean, they were almost impossible to avoid. They were simple, easy, and cut every loophole. And it's been the only time I had to very embarrassingly say to a client, there's absolutely no way out of this. Like, no way legally, we'd have to break the law. It was such a well-drafted law. And as I said, I'm certain that God appeared to the government and told him how to do it because it was that well done. Most laws are very, very badly written, like the Income Tax Act and the mandates were pretty shitty written at the time. So generally, there's ways to deal with it. So God, man, women, and then government, and then persons. And again, you've got to also work out, once you know this stuff, where is it going to work and where will it not work? So, for example, I've had people say to me that they've gone to try and disown this strawman. And I've said, I'm still looking for the day, and I would be eager to see if someone who's actually done it and not been getting shit from the government. And as yet, I've never met anyone. I've met numerous people who've tried, even people in the best common law experts in the underground community I was in. And all of them told me, they said, we actually can do it, but it's a nightmare and we don't bother doing it. We think there's smarter ways to deal with this, where you can learn to do what Jesus did, as I said at the beginning, when he said, give to Caesar what is Caesar and God's what is God's. In other words, to the extent you're playing the government commercial game, play the game and play it well. But then also have your sovereign identity outside the system, so you never actually own. And that's how I've, for example, negotiated the director's ID. I've actually, I've circumvented, I don't actually have one, and I function perfectly normally. But it took me a lot of work to make sure I remained outside it, but you're in the system because I have corporations and everything like that. So a lot of it's planning and doing stuff like that. And I like what the Art of War says. It says to plan for what is difficult while it's easy. Do what is great while it's small. And in COVID, I remember when everyone was saying that masks would never come in. Meanwhile, I'm going down the doctor getting exemptions. So I'm sure they'll come in. And likewise, I am certain we're heading for a very major financial collapse and some kind of reset. And that's just logical. I mean, it's not hard to work that out. We've got cost of living going through the roof. The currencies are going crazy. And every time in history that happens, 100% of the time, eventually they're forced to reset the currency or make some change. And cryptocurrencies are booming right now. A lot of clients I know become millionaires from it. I invest in it, and I'm very happy I do. It's a great investment and made me some good money. But basically, the world is going digital. BlackRock approved an ETF, got approved recently, as well as 10 others. So eventually, digital currencies are going to become the norm. And I don't know if cash will necessarily completely go, but it'll become, as I say, at the very least, taxi and Uber, like a taxi, and quite possibly eventually may go. And will it ever fully go? Not sure. Maybe, maybe not. The biggest thing is to realize that these are likely outcomes, that it's going to either be significantly diminished or hard to use, or eventually possibly even go. And it's important to plan yourself well in advance in your investing affairs, in your wealth affairs, and still understanding that we're still in the transition. I mean, the existing system is still functioning. It's just functioning on life support a little bit more than it was before. But as I've discovered, unfortunately, with my, seeing my father, who I love very much, has been going through dementia, for example, and Alzheimer's and not very well. He's had an incredible ability to stay alive and fight, and my feeling is he's going to be around a bit longer, so, and we can see that with people. So realize that this is the time to be planning now, not basically hoping in the future it goes. There's a very shocking rule of 72 that I show people that says, for example, that let's say that you're age 40 right now and you want to retire at 65 on let's say $100,000 a year income. Basically, you would need an average of 5 to 6% per annum, around $2 million in assets outside your family home. And if you're 40, allowing for the rule of 72 and inflation, you're going to need $8 million equivalent today in that time. And every year that you wait and don't plan your affairs, the more vulnerable you become financially. And I show this in some of my webinars, and it always shocks people. So this is one of my favorite books. It's a difficult book to read, but one I would suggest that you all Um, not necessarily read it, but his stuff and summaries online. Basically, this was written in 95, and he talked about what was going to happen. And much of what we're seeing now with digital currencies, governments going crazy, pandemics, it was all written about in this book, because what he did was they compared the Roman Empire to today and showed how we're following the same pattern, which completely collapsed and got taken over. So they're predicting we're going to be in a whole new world by 2050, pretty much. But in the meantime, it's going to be pretty ugly getting there as governments fight to stay on and hold on to the old way of being, where we got the nation states that dominate individuals and worlds. But they said the new world order that's coming up will eventually collapse and we'll go back to more sovereign communities, but it's going to be an ugly time to get there. So it's a good book to read to understand what's happening. And generally, I find the smart people, they tend to be well prepared, well ahead of the game, and they are kind of accepting the ugly truth of what's going on. And I cannot say strongly enough to you that the more you can accept the ugly truth of where things are at and not live in a fantasy or delusion, and that's been my motto for this year especially. Like all fantasy goals in my life, I've weeded out, and I've had some for sure, some of my goals I can see are difficult but realistic. Some of them are very realistic. So it's understanding that. And to get through the next 10, 20 years and get financially independent, it's very doable because you're never going to get better opportunities than what you got right now. And they talked about this. We're seeing a major upheaval and a time of change. And there was a lot of similarities because the Great Depression didn't just suddenly come on. It happened over quite a few years. 1929, Black Monday, October, there was a major crash of the market. And over the next 3 years, it eventually kind of all fell apart. And so I believe we're in that beginnings now. We're kind of seeing a lot of similarities to all that right now. I think we're heading in the next few years into a fairly major time of crisis, perhaps in the next year or two. That's my honest opinion. Because COVID changed everything as we knew it. And this seems to be, I was in Asia at a conference and I was there with a guy who was a billionaire connected with Alibaba. There was another guy who runs a major work over there. I met one of the huge financial planning experts in Asia and found we had similar strategies to teach people to get wealthy and prosper, all very awake people. And all of them were saying around this time, they are seeing. And they said, there's no doubt we're in a major crisis. The reality is when cost of living has soared and gone up, it's inevitable that youth will embrace socialism because think about it. Most young people could not even possibly get a home. Even if they've got a 150K income in WA, it's going to be hard because foreign investors own a lot of it. Negative gearing makes it very achievable. Eventually, the majority is going to be pushing to scrap negative gearing and scrap all kinds of stuff and eventually start, and it could even go as extreme and starting to, force property sales, take properties, things like that. Personally, Australia has proven, like in COVID, we tend to go to extremes. So I'm not saying this will happen, but I think it's very feasible in the next 3 to 5 years. We could see some pretty bad shit happen in Australia with assets and economics. So it's very important to be still participate in the system, but be having your plan B exit. That's really important. And like in our Global Wealth Club company, we run that does financial and wellness education and financial sovereignty. For example, in January, we were teaching about how to prosper in times of chaos. This month has all been about women's financial independence and focused on helping women because women 40 to 50 is the fastest growing homelessness and poverty issue, who raise families and never focus on finance. So we're trying to help bring awareness of that and help empower women with lots of empowered women speakers. Next month is going to be all about Plan B for civilization collapse, for example, in our company, to really help educate people in that. So every month we have a theme because I think this is a real warning. This socialism thing is going to increase. And honestly, I can see why. For most youth, they've just lost hope. They don't have dreams anymore. They don't have a basic faith anymore. So but gives grounding. So we've got some problems, and I think we all know that, and socialism has failed all the time. But hey, guess what? We're going to keep doing it, and people keep running. I was actually in Panama in 2018, just after Venezuela collapsed from socialism. And I could not believe how many Venezuelan pretty young girls were over there in Panama, working in bars and strip clubs and in various other cigar places, and all to send money back to their family because the system had collapsed. And so just after the socialism had ruined it. So people were fleeing Venezuela and the poor basically were stuck there. And like the Roman Empire, the rich get out early. They're already planning. Most of my high net worth clients have already got their plan Bs in place now. They're already fine. These other people are going shit, and they're doing the oh shit strategy, what I call it right now, which is getting their plan B and getting themselves out of the matrix to make sure they're not too late and doing it now, because there is still time, but time is running out like you wouldn't believe. So, and I don't believe in fear mongering, but I do believe in telling the truth. And it's kind of like, to me, if you're about to drive off a cliff and you can't see the road, if I'm yelling at you, screaming, throwing stones at your car to try and stop you, and I do stop you and you're furious at me, you'll be grateful once you can see you going over the cliff. So equally here, I think we are heading for a world of trouble. Unfortunately, I think I'm preaching to the converted here. I think we all know that. And the key is to stay balanced and find out how we're going to get our plan B and come out fine. Who's with me? Just raise your hands, and I just want to make sure that everyone, I'm on track and not going off on a weird tangent. Okay, beautiful. So, it's inevitable. And look, in saying that, I mean, goodness me, I find when there's volatility from this stuff, like right now trading, I do a bit of NASDAQ trading and futures and other stuff. And honestly, it's like market's just fabulous right now to trade. They're just so volatile and crazy. Cryptos are just moving beautifully. So this is what I'm saying. Just because the world is in deep shit doesn't mean you have to be in deep shit. Most people around you are going to end up in deep shit, but you cannot be in deep shit by taking action, by staying balanced and seeing the opportunities, which are plentiful in this time, and learning skills that you never had before to get financially ahead. This guy, by the way, here, I was first on the Port of Stainsbury in 2014 by the financial advisor to one of the rich 200 in Australia, who I met, spent time in her home and did a whole lot of stuff with her. And he said, you got to follow this guy. And I have, and made a lot of money with his stuff and using his stuff. But he's a very balanced guy. He's not an extremist, but he was very awake in COVID. He got out and spoke out against it in America, took a big risk. Tremendously economically brilliant guy. He's now a billionaire, sold his company, but very awake. He recently, for example, did an amazing documentary, if you can see it, where he actually exposes who's really behind the crap in the world. And he said people get caught up with Gates and Soros, but he said you got to actually go deeper than them, which I've been arguing. He shows who financially is running the whole show. Larry Fink and of BlackRock and Bloomberg with the media, and he shows their funding to just about everyone. And it's an amazing documentary. This guy is a very, very awake guy, and he's very on the ball, and he's made a lot of money for a lot of people over the years. And he wrote a book called The American Jubilee, where he wrote about a year before COVID, where he talked about lockdowns and stuff like that. But he's saying, he goes, you can rest assured we're heading for some very major problems. But he said, it doesn't mean you have to have problems. This is a time you can be set up for life. But he said protection and knowledge and education is very important right now. And in his documentary on Bloomberg and Fink, which he openly said, look, he said, I could well get myself targeted for this. I'm aware of that, but I refuse to be silent when I can see that we're heading into major problems in our country. And there are billionaires now speaking out about this. So, and what they're saying, though, again, is that if you take steps now and you take action and you put shit in place, you can be not only protected by what's coming up with this reset and what's coming up with everything, but you can make money and be set up for life. My business partner of Global Wealth Club has actually said, if you're not financially independent by 2030, it means you're just doing jack shit, because he said it's never going to be an easier time than right now, because it's just so bad and things like that. So we've heard this expression, but really financial resets is nothing new. It's just when the economy turns to shit, they reset and start again, like they did 1923 Germany, Zimbabwe, all kinds of places. So Australia, I mean, these are exploding right now, absolutely exploding. Psychiatrists are booked out and many not taking clients. I mean, it's just crazy, you know? So you want to position your wealth for crisis and get yourself out of the matrix and start taking your wealth seriously. Like, really, I would encourage everyone to do that, to start doing that. And look, who here has got money and you're really nervous about it? Just raise your hand, or, you know, like you're genuinely nervous about it, like, because you can think, shit, we really are in a bit of shit. Yeah. It's good to be afraid in the right time. That's something that Porter Staintree also says. He said, when it's good to be afraid is when the risk is genuine. Like if a lion's about to eat you, it's not a bad idea to be afraid and take action. But he said equally, when opportunity waits before you, it's good to be greedy and move fast and things like that. It's a very good quote. So I say to people again, if this happens, you can rest assured we're going to have more problems. I think the odds are better than 50-50 that we'll go into World War III, just simply because, as I said to some friends the other day who were kind of, I wouldn't call them awake, but they were arguing on the Russia-Ukraine situation and that. And, oh, we think it's good. We do need to help those poor Ukrainians. I said, and it's really people like you who are the reason that World War III will happen, because we're interfering in stuff which basically has nothing to do with us. And the fact is, there's many countries right now, like Afghanistan, where worse atrocities are happening than what's going on over there, or Mozambique. But because there's no oil and stuff like that, no one's going to give a rat's ass about them. So I just said, at the end of the day, it's the fact that, shit like this is said, that's the reason there's a good chance. So I said, hopefully I'm wrong, but I think there's a chance we're going to go there. And if that's the case, then that kind of changes supply chains and it changes things around inflation and volatility of markets and all kinds of shit. So it's really good to be positioning yourself and doing something about your business and thinking about it. So it's a little bit kind of difficult in a short class like this to teach everything. So one of the things I can encourage you, if you're really enjoying this, I'll be sharing more at the end stuff that you can do in our free webinars and trainings that we run, and we even run paid programs in that. But like, for example, we do have a YouTube channel. Like, I know some people have asked me about the Director's ID, and I've said, well, we've done a whole series on our Global Wealth Club at YouTube channel. So, we've got a lot of good free trainings on there. So, you can go here. And
I'm Black. I'm the founder of the Global Wealth Club.
Yeah, so just watch waffling.
Qualified financial planner.
That's my media guy who did that. But yeah, I'll just put that in the chat in case anyone gets bored and has insomnia and wants to watch some stuff. But yeah, so as I said, all this opens up incredible opportunities. Okay. So things like in the Great Depression, this is what people talk about, but what we don't hear is people making a shitload of money as the new world came about. And it was these people here who just did not get caught up in the drama. So while everyone else is traumatized and reading about what's lost has been, I'm not saying don't deal with the grief and trauma, because you need to, but just really make sure that in the midst of that, you're seeing the opportunity. Like, am I excited about the fact that we've got drones and AI taking over the world? I can't say that I am. Does that mean that I just sit there and not invest? No, I invest heavily in that kind of stuff. They're good companies. I think it's inevitable that it's coming in. And I think there's good that can be done. I found AI has made a huge difference in my business. I think drones have a good place. It's just when you've got criminals running the system, unfortunately, they can do criminal stuff. So it's just important, though, to realize things, face the truth, face your grief, but at the same time, invest. Make sure your business is sustainable and going to last, and things like that. Because especially as a very simple example, I tell people, more and more stuff is there for free. People in times of expense, when costs are basically of living going up, people are more, frugal with their funds. They're wanting to make sure they get real value for money. They're expecting more for their money. And I'm sure most of you would be the same. Like, you're wanting more. When you're in a time when everything's abundant, you'll just spend money like no tomorrow. But people start thinking twice about discretionary expenses, I do for fitness. I do some pole dancing for a bit of fitness and that. And so some of my friends are strippers, and they've told me that in the strip clubs, they said, yeah, no, numbers have dropped off a lot and people are spending less money. There's cafes, people start thinking twice about little things, Perth, we've been a bit sheltered because we're actually a more prosperous kind of city. And I'm not saying we're perfect, but our government's probably a little bit better than some of the others in the world. I mean, in terms of the way they run the economy. And so, but right now across the world, in America, people are in deep shit. They're really hurting in this stuff. So it just means that your business, you got to really ask yourself, is this going to still serve a need in society? And like never before, you want to make sure you're serving in your business, in your work, and that what you're doing is valuable. Because in a time of AI change, a lot of jobs will change. And like in the Industrial Revolution, things has changed. Electric cars will get better. They'll solve the charging problems 5, 10 years from now. There'll be more of them. You'll find robots in cafes. You'll find a lot more self-ordering systems, things like that, which means less jobs in that area. So upskilling right now is so fucking important, excuse the French, like upskilling yourself, really, really upskilling. Because realizing though, if you're willing to upskill, like you can do stuff that 30 years ago, I mean, I couldn't do when I was young, I couldn't. You can learn to trade online now just on your thing. You can learn about cryptos. You can do businesses. You can set up income. In our Women's Month right now, I've got amazing women speaking. I've got like 2 women teaching about how they built online companies. I've got another 29-year-old girl talking about how she creates automated online income funnels and how she does it practically, and there's so many things you can do now, which you couldn't do before. So the opportunities right now for those willing to upskill, take their life seriously and educate themselves and stay balanced, I can't say it enough. This is a remarkably exciting time. I think this year and the next year, you're going to see more wealth being transferred and created than just about ever imaginable. So that's exciting news for you today. Is there anyone here feeling a bit excited about that or hopeful? And that's kind of good news for them. And I'm telling you what I'm seeing, by the way. I have people come and see me and I'm seeing the money people are making. So don't believe anyone who's scaremongering you with that. What you should believe is that many jobs, if you're holding on to the current system and hoping it stays the same, you should be scared, and you should be terrified because there is going to be change. But if you're willing to adjust and change and adapt, you're heading for some of the greatest times of your life. So, I mean, time is running out. You want to be protected, cashed up, and ready to go. A very useful book I like to mention to people is the Bancroft book, because one of the things he talks about, he wrote this book actually for the 400 naughty families who control the world. And he basically, he pretty much says, when you go to read the book, you're all excited thinking, oh my God, because now it's available on the internet where it wasn't for 120 years. He pretty much writes the most boring financial planning manual in history in 1,000 pages. Where he just talks about the secrets of being a billionaire and being super wealthy is doing just this. In fact, when I was in Asia at that Thailand event I mentioned, and I'm sitting with a billionaire from Alibaba and one of Asia's top financial planners, he's got many multi-millionaire, he just said, yeah, bro, 5 buckets formula. And I knew what he meant. Like, always have 5 investment classes, whatever they happen to be, make sure your wealth is spread. That's the kind of idea of the balanced portfolio. So these are just getting back to basics, and nothing changes no matter what's going on with the world. These things are proven and tried. Making sure your wealth is protected by using structures and by having, if you've got money, making sure you've got structures to protect yourself from the taxman pillaging you, from basically people who want to sue you and do shit to you. These are all really important stuff. Making sure that you're legally minimizing your tax. And I know a lot of people are keen about that one because, there's been people who've come to me about going offshore, becoming a non-resident, which is always one way. Because the reality is, Australians right now are paying, Australian, business owners and workers are just paying way too much tax. Just type a Y if you agree with me. Y or raise your hand. It's unbelievably fucked up. And yeah, I don't have any problem with some taxes. I think personally, some taxes is very good for contribution. But what we're seeing right now is absolutely absurd. And so it feels like you're running and trying to get ahead of a ball and chain, basically. And I always say to people, it's like trying to live life basically carrying a backpack pretty much, while you're doing it all the time. It's damn hard to do it. So this is an example about, one of the things I like to tell people. I'm trying to give a bit of an overview here to help you get an overview about the matrix. So the first thing I discussed today was about mindset, which was the first thing. The second thing was about income and finding income sources and protecting your wealth and growing your wealth. The third thing I want to mention here today is I'm just covering taxes, because you do need to find a way, as Kiyosaki says, to legally reduce your taxes and stay within the law. And the problem is, if you blindly trust your expert advisors to sort it out and hope it all goes away, The smarter solution is to be self-empowered, but always work with the best experts to do that. That's one of the things that you would do. Like who here, just if you're a business owner, type a 1 in the chat. If you're an employee, just type a 2. Just I want to get an idea who's on here to work out where I go from here. Like a 1 if you're a more business owner, investor, or that kind of path. 2 if you're an employee. Okay, good. Mainly 1 so far. I'm pleased about that, because if you're mainly a 2, it's more difficult to do much about this. That's one of the comments I'll tell people. And that's why Robert Kiyosaki's proven and tried cash flow quadrant about getting yourself out of that's part of the getting out of the matrix, is to get yourself out, onto the right side of the quadrant. So has everyone here read Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or his cash flow quadrant? Just type a Y or no or whatever else. Okay. No, for some. If you haven't, I would strongly encourage you to read that if you haven't. It's a really, for those of you who've read it, I'm sure you would agree with me. It's a ripper of a book. It's a very well written book. It kind of covers, things that you can actually do, because the reality is people pay an alarming amount of tax. They really do. And in fact, especially if you're business owners, it's quite horrific. And many business owners are resorting to blatantly almost illegal, dodgy stuff and private foundations just to try and get ahead, and then are lying awake at night, terrified, hoping they don't get caught. And that's just not a good situation at all. So this is, according to Taxpayers Association, that when you add up income taxes, GST, capital gains, stamp duty, fuel excise taxes, the average small business Australian on a reasonable income, that's what they're paying. 2/3 of their fucking money goes to the government. And that's why people are pissed off about it, And this is the cash flow quadrant, by the way, by Robert Kiyosaki. So he said that when you're on the left side of the quadrant, it's very difficult to get ahead financially, and even more difficult to minimize taxes, because the tax laws heavily hit the left side of the quadrant. On the right side of the quadrant, there's a lot more that you can actually do. So, basically, yeah, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, because someone's asking about the books. And this is it here. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. In fact, I have clients I do mentoring who they pay me to mentor in their life. And if I haven't read it, I say, read this, these 2 books. And the third one, I say, these are the Bible of wealth. It's The Richest Man in Babylon by Klassen. They're the 3 Bible books, as I call it, for anyone to read. My dance teacher, I told her, read those 3 books, and she has. And now she's like, oh my God, let's go ahead and make money. So yeah, it'd be good books. But yes, so this is the basic of the idea of what you want to be doing. And if you're on the BNEI, you really want to consolidate your situation and grow your wealth and protect it. If you're on that side, you want to be getting over here quick, bloody smart, So yeah, look, I'm hoping this is all valuable for you or whatever. And if anyone ever makes you feel bad about legally minimizing taxes, just read what the House of Lords was basically said. Everyone can basically minimize their taxes legally, There was another very good quote, which I didn't get to put on here, but by Justice Raymond Learned Hand in the US, who actually was known to hate tax minimization and believed everyone should pay high taxes. And he made a similar quote. He goes, the reality is, I respect the law, and people got a blooming right to legally minimize their taxes, even if I don't like it. Kerry Packer says this here. He goes, one of the great quotes, when he was challenged at the print media inquiry, he goes, well, of course I'm minimizing my taxes. Why wouldn't I? Because you're not exactly spinning it that well. And he shut the journalists up well and truly. One of my favorite quotes when he was challenged. One of my favorite little one, a bit of light humor. Lady Godiva in 1066 was trying to get her husband to reduce the taxes because they were oppressive. And in the end, she rode naked in the village and said, I'm going to keep doing it until you basically, and that was in the village because she was a noblewoman, a shame. So she rode naked through the village and said, I want to keep doing it till you lower the taxes. And her husband hastily lowered the taxes. So anyone want to join me and go naked around Perth, just let me know and let's see how we can do it. Who here would go naked to get your taxes cut? I mean, it's pretty funny. I like that one. But I mean, I do it, by the way, but not everyone would, I'm sure. So the cost of not tax planning, this just gives you a little bit of an idea of what happens to you over 20 years. If you have $100,000 invested and making 10 or 20% per annum, how much money you'll have after 20 years. So literally taxes, as you can see, it's not just the immediate money you pay, it's the cost of your compounding. So it's the reason why, and you want to do it legally, because if you're illegal, then of course you've got other issues to face, which can be far worse. So the wealthy do this. There was a study in 2016 by the Sydney Morning Herald, journalist Peter Martin, who basically looked at the 56 richest Australians. 2 of them paid taxes, 54 didn't pay it. And the 2 who did, one paid $4,354, the other one paid $54,132 or something like that. But they all spent over $1 million with their tax advisors. So the point I'm making is here, again, protecting your wealth. They know the matrix, they know the system well and true. Just out of interest, who's following this and finding this really helpful? Because one of the things I want to talk about now is if you don't have a structure, make sure that you do, okay? That's really, 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 really important, is to have a structure, a setup of some kind. And what I mean by structure is things like a company or a trust or foundation. Things like that are really important to make sure that you don't end up, that you can protect your wealth. So the first thing people should do if they don't have a structure is to actually do that. So if someone said, don't know what to do next, look, the fact that you acknowledge that's the starting point, that's always the way to go, you know, because once you know there's a problem, you can start acting on it step by step in small steps. And the main thing is that you're here listening to the webinar and know that you need to do something about it, because that's the starting point. Because believe you me, there's many people right now who are not doing anything about it. So I always say to people, well done for educating yourself and taking time out to do something about it. That in itself puts you ahead of everyone else, you know, or a lot of other people. So, you know, having a decent structure, for example. And one of the things I like to do, and I don't think, unfortunately, I've got it on here. I'll see if I can find it just to help everyone out a little bit here. But I did this thing that people were saying they found really, really helpful at our recent event we ran at the Global Wealth Club. In fact, I'll just take you over to it. I found a slide, which is good. There's a few very useful slides here. In fact, yeah, actually, I might just quickly show you these. One of them was I was just talking about the procrastination will cost you. But this is the example that I was giving at the thing about your income. So every year that you don't act in investing and mastering it and looking after your money, you make it a lot harder. You know, so if you wait 12 more years, it becomes harder again. And each time you do it, it becomes harder and harder and harder. So it's quite frightening when you actually do this thing, whereas the younger you start. Is there anyone here, for example, who's under 30? I'm just curious. Just raise your hand if you are. No one? Okay. Is there anyone here between 30 and 50? Yep, quite a few of you. Okay, a lot of people. Is there anyone here who's over 50? Like, just type like Y, actually, just to distinguish. Like, are there any who are over 50? Yes, if you're over 50, you've really got to take action, for example, you know, really take action on this and put things in place, as you can see from that. So these are that. And this is just an example of procrastination and what it can do to you. And that was one of the things that always shocked people. And so, like I said, you know, at the start, this is one of the other things I said in the event. But the other thing I'll quickly show you is the tax wealth matrix that I actually taught there was in that the majority of people, that the system, that the actual wealthy themselves don't really pay a lot of taxes. Because they work the matrix out well and truly. And I've never met a mate. This is what I always laugh about. when people start arguing with me about private foundations, and for example, I just started to okay. I said, this is what I find interesting. I've never, ever actually met a highly wealthy person, for example, who's got a private foundation, like ever. Like maybe one exception, and he didn't use it anymore. They all work within the system because they know there's better ways to do it. So like we've got this like tax wealth matrix as an example. The other thing which I wanted to get from this particular thing, which I'll show you as well, is I was going to show you what I was trying to explain about the various tiers. So the tax wealth matrix, the top people create the game. They don't pay tax. The bottom players don't make any money, so they don't pay tax. And it's the slaves in the middle that pay the tax. That's pretty much the matrix. All of you here would fall, I'd say, on the right side of the tier 2, the awake 20%. And they're generally what you call the pissed off ones. They're awake. And we're like, this is like bullshit. We can see this is crap. These group here celebrate, they get vaccinated, they do all the kind of shit and go and get caught up in all that and go, hey, man, you know, let's do it and make everyone else do it. And we think everyone should pay a shitload of taxes, even though it's high. This group don't like it, but they kind of go, oh, you know, we can kind of see it and that. And this group over here are pissed off. Who here is pissed off about how much taxes and how the system works? Like, just are. It's good to know you're just pissed off about it because it's like, fuck this, man. You know, and so generally the pissed off ones often end up doing silly stuff, like they get into silly stuff that gets them in trouble, and then they're staying away anxious. The better way to do it is be what I call the upper echelon of this circle of awake. In other words, although you're not in that category, you're thinking like this category and setting yourself up like that category. So that's the ultimate wisdom. You know, you want to learn to, I like what Trump wrote in his book about don't get angry, get even, or just take action. Let your anger go into action to get in the upper part of his circle so you start functioning, structuring, and thinking like this group over here. Because as one of my wealthy clients said the other day, you know, and I've got a girl talking tonight after this one, I'm doing a podcast with her to our Global Wealth Club. She's a 44-year-old awake girl. She refused to get vaccinated in Melbourne. And then she's like, shit, what do I do now? You know, because she didn't have any income anymore. So she went and literally was up till 2 every morning studying cryptos, taught herself that, and is now retired financially from doing cryptos, you know, income. And I asked her to do me a favor and come and help, you know, empower women. And she said, yeah, I'd love to do that, because normally she's fairly private and just does her stuff in the background. So I was very pleased that she did that. But, you know, we talk about this kind of stuff as well, you know, the importance of channeling your anger into action to do something about it. So that's the biggest thing I would encourage everyone to do. And so it's important to also know where you're at. So if you are still an employee having difficulties, you're probably more around the tier 2 category, which means that's your focus for now. Just start to create an income for yourself and get yourself out and start moving towards a business or good at income. And if you've already got a business or starting point, you want to be expanding your wealth and making sure you've got some structures in place. So you want to get some structures in place around this time. If you've already got money behind you and got a business, but you know, and you got some money behind you and you're not financially free, but you need to be about protecting your wealth and using foundations and doing stuff like that. And especially if you're moving around the tier 4, tier 5, you really want to be doing the foundations and structures and setting yourself up. I'm just curious. I mean, from people looking at that, what tier would you say you're in? Just write a number. I just want to get a bit of an idea. 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. Because if you know it, you know what you've got to do next. Yeah, so if you're 1, for example, you've got to start moving towards creating an income, you know, getting some income sorted. If you're 4, you want to be getting some structures in place and really consolidating. If you're 2 to 3, you want to be educating, expanding your knowledge, educating yourself like no tomorrow, as well as number 4. But number 4, you would be doing more advanced education. So yes, 3, you'd be 1 and 2, you'd be educating yourself in the basics to get an income and inspire yourself. If you're around to 2 to 3, you'd be wanting to expand your knowledge, expand your possibilities to get your income, grow your business. If you're around to 3 to 4, then you want to be basically not getting more advanced education to grow your wealth and invest, and then also get a structure. That's the kind of idea. So who likes that diagram, by the way? This took us 3 months to prepare, you know, interviewing wealthy people, talking with them and working to try and see what the common traits were to create the ultimate, what we call system, to work with people to help them get you know? So, because once you're number 5, you've got everything in place. You're moving towards financial freedom. And then once you're financially free, you're about mastery, you know? So yeah, it gives you an idea of where you want to work towards. And I actually thank my pole dance teacher for this, because she's got like 10 tiers to go from a basic one to a world-class dancer, you know, because she herself won the world championship in pole dancing 3 years, you know, for 2 or 3 times, and she's one of the most famous in the world. So she's just succeeded in most stuff she's touched. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea. The last thing I want to touch on a little bit before I kind of, you know, take questions is foundations. Is there anyone here who's interested in foundations? Like, this is something that really grabs you. This is my little thing I love, because I used to work in the tax office in my dim, dark, evil past. And I actually at one stage was the foundations expert. I've been involved in churches. I've set up about 50 to 60 foundations or more, maybe 100 over the years. And I love this because I reckon we're moving where charity and giving back is such a big thing. And the benefits you get from doing this are insane. Absolutely insane. So if you're in about a tier 4, especially possibly tier 3, but definitely if you're around the tier 4, tier 5, this is a big thing you would be looking at, possibly even tier 3, depending on what you're doing. So what these do is this. Lord McNaughton in the House of Lords said that basically you can summarize them into 4. One is directly relieving poverty. Like, this is not educating people. This is like giving crisis counseling on a helpline, food to people in the streets, to the homeless, that kind of stuff. Advancing religion, because he said society needs faith and religion. So it's any kind of spiritual teaching and awareness to help empower people in that area. Advancing any kind of education and anything else apart from the above. So I know most people here, who here has heard of private foundations, for example? Just raise your hand. My experience, a lot of people in the WAC community are doing. Has anyone here got one? Just type a Y if you have. I'm just curious. And to me, foundations are a very, very good example for me, a very good example on what I call knowing how to play the game on giving what is Caesar's and God what is God. That's been a really good example for me. Because basically, for example, you've got a whole lot of stuff that basically, there's an ATO announcement, for example, that was actually done on the 9th of February last year, basically 1 year and 12 days ago, where they pretty much announced, where they said, yep, hang on. My next webinar with the crypto expert, she just messaged me saying she's in now, waiting to go. I'm like, oh, yeah, you're early. So, yep. So basically, so what happened here was 2 types of foundations, private and public. So the ATO clearly came out and said, that if it's a public foundation, we're okay with it, provided you're not doing really dodgy stuff. If you've got a private foundation, we're going to target you, and they've been doing it. And so I tell people that the public foundations, for example, are not only legal, but most of what you can do in a private, you can do in a public, and a whole lot more. So I'm a big believer in these things because you get a lot of recognition and the governments tend to look after it. So I'm just going to quickly walk you through the 6 main benefits, for example, why I like it. So private foundations, and this is what I tell people, because people say, yeah, but you know, you're just operating outside the system. I'm like, okay, in theory, the mafia shouldn't be allowed to come in and shoot you. It doesn't mean they won't. So I said, in theory, and I've studied private foundations and all that, and I've been involved in them from my years. I said, look, private foundations, technically, legally, they're correct, but good luck telling the ATO when they've had 100% success in every court case where they ever targeted anyone who's done it. So I said, if you want to take that risk, just understand if you get looked at and you get taken to court, you will get absolutely flummoxed in court because that's how the system works. So I can't be bothered with that. The public foundations, for example, philanthropy, giving back financial blessings to help others. It's an amazing feeling. Who here likes giving every now and again to help someone less fortunate? Like, I love Just raise your hand if you just feel damn good when you do it. Yeah, like I like just giving things to homeless people and shit like that. It's just awesome. There's nothing better than protecting your assets in a foundation. Good luck to anyone trying to sue you. Governments have a policy not to target foundations, and even if you've been naughty, if you're a public foundation, they more just educate you, give you a gentle slap on the hand, and help you do it right for the future because they want to encourage people to do philanthropy. They want to encourage people. So they'll actually work with you more. Not only will they work with you more, the tax exemptions are there. State tax exemptions, like from stamp duty. There's income tax exemption for the foundations. There's, in some cases, you can claim tax deductions for donations and contributions. It's insane tax differential to accumulating wealth. That is why the fastest growing structure among the rich in Australia and America is foundations, like they're exploding. The problem we've got right now is that I got a letter recently from the Charities Commission apologising because they're like 3 months behind in approvals or something. Because a lot of the rich now and the wealthy are doing this because they've realised that shit, there's not much else we can do, and we do want to give back. So you look in public relations, it looks good for you when you've got one. And right now, as an example, I have a foundation myself. I've got a $10,000 a month grant from Google for advertising for free for my foundation. There's various land grants. There's like an insane amount of grants for foundations, like ridiculous. It's like, oh my God, like governments will just give you stuff because governments can't cope with the growing aging population and things like that. So governments are keen as mustard to reward people who are doing it. So that's one of the good signs of government and one of the good things. And so things like that. So okay, this is just my crypto rent. Okay, so there's various types of foundations, which you can do. You can do ones to relieve poverty, for example. You can do ones to, so just to give you a bit of an example, I'll just quickly show you examples. You got the Public Benevolent Institution, which is like crisis counseling, if you're into that. If you're into giving money to homeless or want to make a big difference to solve WA's horrible problem with cost of living. And my experience is that most people who've got money, especially who come into my life, are good people. And they're already doing a lot of this shit, but they're not getting any reward for it. That's what I find. Like one of my ladies said, but I don't do any philanthropy. And I said, I don't believe you. And finally, she said, oh, well, I do a lot of free education for abused women and help them get empowered and help them with their mental health. And I help them with their financial counseling. I'm like, and you don't charge for it. And she goes, no, I go, well, that's philanthropy. And she goes, I suppose it is. So, public benevolent, health promotion, that's a real beauty as well. This is where you can promote awareness of a disease and educate on specific illness like autoimmune, diabetes, whatever tickles your fancies. This is, of course, one of the most favoured, as you would know, as Hillsong showed. I mean, the tax exemptions and the favour for churches is bigger than anything else. And that goes back to the fact that in Australia and America, our legal system is based on the common law, which is the law of Moses and the Holy Bible. Who didn't know that, by the way? But our whole legal system in Australia is actually based on the Holy Bible and the law of Moses. Just raise your hand if you didn't actually know that. So a lot of people don't know that. So if you know the Bible very well, you'll get a very good idea. And I run a whole common law course, for example, on our site where people become members, where we teach this stuff, and you actually see how. And knowing that, I mean, I was able to do a lot of the mandates just using the Bible because the Bible actually showed you all the clues because the Bible was actually, was basically the common law foundation for our legal system in Australia and England. So basically, an example was in the Scientology case in the High Court. Justice Murphy said, it doesn't really matter what you believe. If you believe Mother Ayahuasca is God, there's actually a case of a church where all they do is smoke cannabis and do ayahuasca, and that's a church because they're basically connecting with God through doing that. So if anyone here wants to start doing that, if you wanted to create a church with the Divine Mother and you had orgies all day, that would be a church. I'm not kidding. It's crazy how broad the laws actually are. And even to the point, as Hillsong showed, and the High Court confirmed, that even if you sell shit and do all that kind of stuff, that's okay. as long as you're mainly using it to promote your belief system, and that's okay as well. And very favorable tax treatment. Much less regulation, like extraordinarily low regulation. You know, Hillsong showed that recently in the media. You've got educational foundations, for example, where you do there's clients who set up homeschooling to help people who are leaving the system to homeschool their kids. This is a very fast growing foundation. This is a passive foundation for wealthy people who don't have time to do charity work themselves, but want to give to other charities. So you can accumulate wealth tax free, and give money away, and things like that, growing rapidly among the super rich. And then of course there's various others which I won't bore you with, but that's pretty much it. So any questions before I just go through? And who would be interested in finding out more, how to get more educated on this, or even, you know, would like to get some help, or, you know, learn more and kind of start to grow your income, get better educated, and even get some guidance and things like that? Few? Yeah, because I'll quickly run through for about 5 minutes, you know, just show you what we do and give some options and things like that. Okay, so do you provide this a slide we can review at a later time? Oh yeah, we're going to have it on YouTube, Amanda. So we don't normally release slides, but I mean, if you email our thing and wanted PDFs, it wouldn't really bother me. You know, I'd be happy to, but you would just email our support team. So any more questions? Otherwise, I'll quickly, you know, go through options. So in terms of what your next step is from here, and you're very keen to find out more about this, you got our site for starters, so you can always go and have a squizzle down at our site. And if nothing else, become a free member. Because in the free trainings, we've got a heap of cool stuff. You know, we've got common law rights introduction. We've got a bit about the financial matrix and escaping it. We've got about the coming collapse. We've got some basics about income creation. This is all free, by the way, some basics on structuring and things like that. We've even got an awake GP who comes and has spoken on health and wellness. We've got our women's thing going on right now. We've got economic updates. So we've always got shit happening, you know. So at the very least, go to our site and make sure you become a member and spread the word, you know. My vision is that that most people on here are getting it for free, you know, because I know that if we've got like 1 million people on here, and like, it's like Google, most people use Google for free and Facebook. So for me, we keep giving good free stuff to make sure our free stuff is so good that people become addicted to us and want to hang around us all the time. That's kind of my unashamed vision of this, to make it really fucking good. And it's actually based on a mission or vision I had in 2018. I actually had a spiritual experience, and I don't know why I'm saying it, but I feel led to say it. But yeah, there's stuff on the internet where I've done that, where I was actually told that certain things were going to happen, like the vaccine experiment and everything. And it was a bit of a shock for me. So I was clearly told in my experience, I got this kind of downloadable sense that you got to set up something to help people through a coming financial reset. And I was telling friends back in 2018, I did a webinar in 2018 on it back at the time. I think people thought I was mad. And when it started happening, they go, shit, because I was actually saw in my experience that we were going to be having some kind of reset happen. So that was why I originally set this up, because I was like, shit, you know, got to really help people, because most people won't know what to do. So we've got the free thing here, and we've got the Ignite here over here, and you've got different levels. And just to give you a bit of an idea, you may remember going back to our cool little diagrams I showed you back before. There was a tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, things like that. So I was showing you all back that time. I think I'll just find it again for you. Yeah, so we had this tier 3, tier 4. So for example, we've got different programs. We've got the Ignite. The Ignite's very much for people around the tier 1, tier 2, even tier 3. The Accelerate program is if you're more tier 3, tier 4. And the VIP if you're more tier 4, tier 5, or whatever else. So most of you would either be suitable for the Ignite if you ever were interested in that, or tier 1. We do have specials on that we're doing at the moment just because we're really improving it. But basically, yeah, that's just a bit of an idea. I'll just quickly walk you through as to what they are. We've got the Ignite really, in fact, we're about to improve this even more so. But what we've got, like, this is a design to basically, it gives you a lot of really good education step by step on the common law. You can skip different stuff if you want. There's a fundamentals on growing wealth, following the stuff I've taught you about today. We've even got a 12 financial mastery program. A lot of it's based on this, where we walk people through a 3-month process. We've got a knowing your wealth profile, which is actually going to be uploaded, but we've got it. Making money from webinars, and we're going to be doing more about investing and trading. And then the biggest thing we do is lots of live events, which are covered in the Ignite. If you're not in the Ignite, you can come and pay, but it's no problem. So you can join for free. So we have live events as well as recorded ones. We have plenty of free, and we have some live events. And then Accelerate is more for people who are kind of want to protect your wealth, and you really want to get more advanced kind of stuff around investing. For example, we have offshore in that. We have very good stuff here in the Mastery Accelerate, where we teach on fundamental wealth, the secrets of investing, following the 5 buckets I mentioned with the Asian financial advisor, asset classes and going into them, things like that. So that just gives you a bit of a thing, a bit of an overview. You can squizzle through at your own time. Just quickly showing you our basically thing here. So the Ignite program, to give you a bit of an idea, this is the summary which I give on it, just to kind of help you out. It's really about giving you the foundations for sovereignty and getting out of the matrix. And it's meant to be quite cheap. There's a $497 a year or $49.70 a month option, or there's a $997, which also includes a bit of, a personalized assessment, which you get as an example. That's what the Ignite is more for, someone around that area there. It's basically, you're starting out, you're kind of wanting to learn the basics of investing, financial management. So it's kind of designed to really give you, some pretty decent education, community, access to support and questions, financial mastery stuff, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, although it's $497, we've changed that to now 2 options, a $497 and a $997, depending on whether you want a more personalized assessment or things like that. The Accelerate program, that one's if you're really you want some really decent one-on-one, as well as basically more advanced education. So that's for more your decent tier 3 or tier 4. You've got more specific goals. You want to know how to structure and things like that. So this is giving you a little bit of an idea as to what you would do and what you would be getting. So you really do want to captain your ship, but you want some help to do it, and you're kind of a bit more ready. So as well as the first 3 pillars, like you got in the other ones, is a bit more advanced education, and you actually get a initial strategy session and a decent wealth plan given to you. So you kind of get that given to you. So that one there is a bit more expensive because that's that kind of stuff. That's basically, $497 basically and then you get the kind of and you get a renewal if after 12 months if you decide that you want to stay involved. But yeah, that's just giving you a bit of an idea. If you're interested to kind of be more involved, all you got to do is just basically, I'll just put it in the chat. We've got our support email. You can always email, or you can go and make sure you copy me in as well. I'm putting my email in here as well. So support@globalwealthclub.org or warren@globalwealthclub.org. In fact, let me just see if I can just make it easy for you. I'll just put it on the screen. Sorry about that. For some reason it didn't quite work. Yep, so you got the emails. You can just type to support@globalwealthclub.org. Let's do that. And you've got warren@globalwealthclub.org. So yeah, you can CC that in, you can email personally, or you can go to our site. The Global Wealth Club, you do actually have an inquiry form as well. Inquire here, either way. I only reason I give you the inquiry is because we're fixing that up at the moment. But that gives you a bit of an idea. You've got plenty to go away with. So, okay. Hope you enjoyed that. Who here is keen to continue educating, is going to join this site, and just raise your hand if I'm going to be seeing you around. That's awesome. Anyone here, just type a Y if you're interested in the Ignite or Accelerate, like you genuinely are interested. Because if you are, yeah, email us and we're happy to send you more information about it. And like I said, we've got some really good offers right now, mainly because, I mean, being really honest, I went through a tough time last year and a bit of changes that were happening. So for a few months, we're a bit quieter. So right now we're offering some particularly good programs for people who are really keen to, take further steps. So we're kind of giving a bit of extra value over and above at the moment. So just email us and we look forward to helping you. So thank you very much, everyone. And I look forward to seeing you around. Bye for now.